We are all just Colin Zabel, aren't we? New to town, just trying to figure out how this place works, just trying to lend a hand, try to figure out what happened, how we can solve this case. And hey, teamwork makes the dream work, right? Hey guys, Pete here. This is my Mare of Easttown episode 2 breakdown. Pretty exciting to see that this series can shift gears like this. I loved all the character development in the first episode, and they really took that and ran with the mystery in this installment. Real quick, a spoiler warning. If you haven't watched the episode yet, this video won't be for you. Do come back after you've seen it, but it is your time to leave. And with that out of the way, let's get into it. Episode 2 was titled Fathers, and they're everywhere. Fathers as parents of this town where everyone is connected in one way or another, and also a conspicuously shady father at the church. Almost feels a little too shady, you might say, and I think there's enough of that to go around in this episode. Everyone seems like a suspect, and everyone they really put out there as being a suspect feels kind of like a red herring. It's also the tale of two mares. We get to know more about her personal background, and we get to see her in action at work, where on the one hand, she's super competent, and then on the other, we see that she plays pretty fast and loose, and really takes things too far when she ignores Brianna's request for a lawyer. In the competent category, when she arrives on the crime scene, she immediately takes charge. She touches the body, she realizes that the girl's been there for a while. When the chief asks her about the wound, she feels confident in saying that her killer would have been face to face with her. And we see her experience when she goes to tell Erin's father about what happened. Knowing it's going to be a tough situation, she makes a call to Lori, her childhood best friend, who happens to be married to one of Kenny's cousins, and she has him and another cousin come to offer support. This goes about how you would expect, and I have to say that it was a great portrayal of a father's grief by the actor who plays Erin's father. He does point the finger directly at Dylan, saying that he never wanted her to have the baby, that he hated her for it, and that he's the only person that would want to hurt her. There were a couple of interesting things that might be clues here. First, he was sleeping in the chair when they came to the door. That might be normal, but we do have to remember that there was that shot of him at the end of the last episode coming inside after dawn. Also, whenever she asks him if he was there all night, he says that he was. And then there was this weird shot of Billy, the other cousin, looking at him after she asked, which just felt kind of out of place. When she interviews him, Dylan doesn't give anything away. He's actually very unhelpful. He's just looking out for himself. He legitimately seems to have no interest in helping Mare figure out who might have killed the mother of his child. He also says he didn't talk to Erin the night before, which may be true, but they definitely had an interaction that was worth mentioning. And things break down in the interview when Mare uses that one thing that she found when she looked around in Erin's room, the pamphlet for the ear surgery, drops that on Dylan as a way to imply that he may have had a motive to kill her. After that, he leaves. There's a press conference where she explains to the community what happened. Dawn and some other people are there, and the sentiment is that they want to find out what happened to Katie, and they want to know if these two crimes are connected. When Mare returns to her office, she meets Colin Zabel, the county detective sent in to help out. We don't know much about him at this point. He did solve a cold case of a 10-year-old girl, and for all intents and purposes, he seems like a pretty good complement to what we know about Mare. Of course, she's pretty cold to him. She doesn't like the fact that he's there in the first place, but we do see them sort of working together after a video surfaces of the fight in the woods. Mare sets things in motion to get an assault warrant for Brianna, but she's also distracted because she wants to figure out why Siobhan was there and why she didn't tell her about it. She's on the way to the family restaurant and she almost leaves Colin behind. He doesn't appear to take it personally. He just wants to know where they need to go if they're not carpooling together. Here we see him advocating for possibly taking things outside, not making a scene, and Mare deciding instead to lean into it. She wants to make this a public arrest. That's going to come back and be a pain for her because now Brianna's father, Tony, is going to follow Mare around for the rest of the episode, trying to first convince her, then threaten her to let his daughter go. That whole side story wasn't my favorite part of the episode, but I did like the idea here that even though what he's doing here is clearly out of bounds, and he escalates, and eventually he actually throws the gallon of milk through her window, breaking her window, she doesn't really pay him that much mind. It's sort of like, yeah, that's just Tony, that's how he is. And it kind of underlines that whole idea of how being a detective in this town where you know everybody has its own complications. So as I mentioned in the interview, she does take things too far. Brianna doesn't want to talk. She asks for a lawyer. It's her right. The interview should end. Colin doesn't even know what to do. He can't believe she's still talking. And eventually he does step in, and that opens the door for Brianna to drop the bomb. On her way out, she says, "No wonder your son fucking killed himself." So we found out that Drew's father, Kevin, who we saw in a vision at the end of the last episode, took his own life. And what's more, when Mare gets back home, she finds out that Drew is doing this thing with his eyes. He has a tic, and that makes her worry that he might have some of the same problems that his father had. That leads her to go pay a visit to her ex-husband, Frank, and there's a plan made so that she'll go to see the doctor in the morning. But on the way out, he asks her about Erin's case. And we learn that he was a teacher of hers in school, and he plays off knowing her to the most part. He said they didn't really talk. He even goes as far as saying that he thought she had problems at home, which in a way kind of points the finger at her father, right? In a murder mystery, it's the kind of thing that stands out. It also echoes what the new priest who was speaking at the church told her cousin, the priest we met in the first episode, when he asked him about Erin after the service. He said, yeah, she was in our youth group. I didn't really know her. We didn't really talk. And it all feels like it may be significant. The next morning, we do see her go and see the doctor. She lays out her concern, which the doctor doesn't seem that worried about. She says that it's a pretty normal thing that happens for kids his age, but they do decide to have him checked out by a neurologist just in case. She also asks Mare if she's seeing someone for therapy. And it sounds like a good idea. The more we learn, the more we know she has going on, but she seems pretty dead set against it. What I thought was most interesting about this exchange was her reaction when she asked about the diagnosis. She threw out a lot of different ones that they ran into when they were trying to get him help, but she never actually settles on one or even gives an idea of what she thinks was going on. In context of the story, it sounds like another mystery that she's never been able to solve. As the case continues, we do see Colin and Mare interview all the kids who were out in the woods. They get an idea of what was happening out there, but no real clues as far as I could tell that point to anybody being a suspect. Colin does interview Siobhan by himself. It's pretty clear that she feels guilty about what happened, having been the last person to talk to her. But there's also a telling moment here when she asks about working with her mom and he asks for advice. And she says to lower your expectations. And this is something that I'll come back to in a little bit. Mare gets some flowers from Richard, and that prompts her to give him a call. It doesn't seem like she has much interest in seeing him, but the conversation takes a turn when he asks her about the case. She decides to go with him to an event. There's a pretty funny setup where she's getting ready, and the whole thing is kind of hilarious when she's actually there. But he's distracted. He actually has a lot of women that are paying attention to him, which maybe that's going to be important one way or the other. She gets bored. She's definitely not liking the hors d'oeuvres, and she starts to leave, but he is able to get her to come back inside after she tells him that he's not getting laid tonight. At around the same time, Erin's dad, Kenny, slips out of the house. His cousin Billy, who was babysitting, falls asleep on the couch, and he gets a chance to leave. Next time we see him, he's in the back of Dylan's car, nursing a bottle of liquor and holding a gun. He tells him to drive off into the woods. Dylan doesn't really have any choice, and when they get to where they're going, he shoots him twice in the back as he's trying to run away. This feels like a murder, but we're left with a cliffhanger where we don't actually know how things ended up. After the date, Mare does head home. That's where she has her run-in with Tony, and that leads to the gallon of milk being thrown through her front window. Dawn works at the store and ends up standing up for her when she sees what Tony's up to. And at the end of the day, he seems like he's going to continue to be a pain in the ass. It's pretty clear that while everything else is going on in the investigation, this situation with Drew and the backstory of what happened to his father is weighing heavily on her mind. And this situation gets a lot more complicated because earlier in the episode, Helen, Siobhan, and Frank went to visit Drew's mother, Carrie, for a supervised visit. We learn that she's in recovery. She's doing pretty good at this point. She's living in a sober house. And we see that she gets along pretty well with the rest of the family. Although it's very clear that she doesn't get along with Mare. This is underlined in a couple of different ways here. And the big thing is that she tells the rest of the family that she's filing paperwork to try to get full custody. And we do see Mare get an idea about this later when she looks at the mail, just before the flying bottle of milk comes through her window. So there were two big cliffhangers here. The first was Dylan getting shot. And the second comes when Erin's best friend, Jess, who we saw her talking to at her apartment before she went to the woods, tells her mother that she has a big secret that she's been keeping. They go over to Lori's house, which I'm not 100% sure why they went there. All we know about Lori is that she's Mare's friend, so when she asks why they didn't go to the police, I assume it's because Mare is Frank's ex-wife, but I don't understand why that means that you would go to Lori's. I'm not sure if I missed something here, so let me know if you have an idea about this in the comments. But for the bottom line, the secret was that Dylan isn't the real father of DJ, Erin's son. Erin never told her friend Jess who it actually was, but she suspects that it was Frank Sheehan, Mare's ex-husband, this guy that everybody seems to love more or less, and who also said that he barely ever talked to Erin. It's a big cliffhanger that's clearly there to make Frank a suspect in the murder. But if you think about it, even just for a short period of time, everybody likes Frank. We see that Siobhan likes Frank. We see that Helen and the rest of the family like Frank. Everyone else in town was going over to his place for a party. So if this is true, that he is the father of Erin's child and other people knew about it, or if Erin was about to expose it, then that would make a lot of other people potential suspects if they were trying to cover it up. The episode does end there, and it was a big one. There's a lot of stuff that happened here. Some real twists and turns. It seems like this custody battle is going to be a big deal for Mare. If she feels like she's responsible in some way for what happened to Kevin, then it tracks that she'll be really protective of Drew. And the fact that his mother's an addict doesn't inspire a lot of confidence for someone in that situation. I said I would come back to this idea about Siobhan because after 2 episodes, it seems like they get along okay, but there's definitely underlying tension. And I wonder if that's related to Frank or if it's related to Kevin. Obviously, she loves her father, and it seems pretty likely that she would have loved her brother in the same way. So problems in Easttown and problems at home. This episode definitely got me hooked into the mystery side of things. I was already there for the character stuff in the first episode, and this was a nice 1-2 punch. It really almost feels like there's 2 different shows side by side here, and I find myself equally invested at this point. The performances were great across the board again this week. I liked the introduction of the new county detective. Introducing Drew's mom, Carrie, also stirs the pot, so a lot of interesting new stuff. I thought the cliffhangers were pretty good. A pretty crazy move by Kenny to go after Dylan like that. And the whole thing with Frank, I mean, there's a lot of possibilities that could come from that. I thought it was notable that we didn't spend much time at the crime scene and that it didn't give much away. We don't linger there very long. She was half naked, which makes it feel like she'd probably been sexually assaulted, but there doesn't seem to be any evidence nearby, and that includes no sighting of her bike, which was one of the few things that sounded important when the kids were being interviewed. The one kid said that he saw her bike when he arrived, but he didn't see it by the time he left. That makes it seem like she rode that out of there, but the last time we saw her, she was just walking into the woods. So there's still not a lot to go off of there. And I think overall, this is a good place to leave things. Hopefully next week we'll be able to really start speculating based on everyone that we know. In the meantime, let's do that in the comments anyways. Let me know what you're thinking, what your first impressions are, and where you think this thing's going. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.